Okay, phase two of containment under the Cold War. The second phase of the Cold War came about as a result of the atomic stalemate, the death of Stalin in 1953, and a change of political leadership in the United States, ushered in what would be known as a competitive coexistence from 1953 to 1961. And so this becomes known, this competitive coexistence is the second phase. So during the Eisenhower administration, two key changes happened under his watch during the Cold War, and it led to something of great concern that we're still dealing with today. First was the nuclear arms race, and then second was covert action. So the nuclear arms race, Eisenhower was concerned about the financial burdens of the military in the context of the Cold War, and wanted to pay down the deficit. And so him and John Foster Dulles devised a scheme to try to reduce the cost of the military by advancing the nuclear arsenal. Right. The thinking was that if communism is going to spread all over the country, if the goal was to contain communism, and we weren't going to directly confront communism, the Soviet Union, in other words, what's the point of having a heavily armed military with lots of ground troops, right? So the thinking was, we'll increase our nuclear arms race, and this will deter the Soviet Union. What ends up happening, though, with the development of the hydrogen bomb and the development of the further development of ballistic weapons, is that the Soviet Union tries its best. Doesn't necessarily accomplish it, but it tries its best to match the United States, bomb for bomb, right? And so by the time Eisenhower's presidency is over, there are over 10,000 nuclear warheads on hair trigger alert, pointing at the United States and pointing at the Soviet Union. Right. So this is creating a kind of brave new world where it's creating quite a lot of anxiety during this era, quite obviously. Of the Cold War, and would continue to do so after Eisenhower's administration. This gets known as what's called MAD, mutually assured destruction, the effects. If you think about the effects within the United States, it leads to it leads in part to a cultural revolution, right? The children that are born during World War II, the baby boomers, are becoming teenagers as mutually assured destruction is becoming more and more of a reality by the early 60s, right? They're becoming either prepubescent or teenagers. And by the late 1960s, they're either older teenagers or young adults, right? Think about what's going on in the 1960s. This is the protest movements, the flower children, the hippie generation. People looking desperately for a different alternative to MAD, right? The third thing that's going to happen is the CIA is moving beyond its original mandate of intelligence gathering to active involvement or covert action in internal affairs of other countries where such action suited American objectives. The problem with this is it's going to cause what gets known in the CIA terms as blowback, right? Unintended consequences that were held deliberately from the American people that come back to haunt the United States. And since the American people weren't aware of these things, they seem to come out of nowhere. One example is what happened in Iran. In 1953, visit the link for more of these details. It's available in the lecture document. But basically what happens in 1953 is Iran is one of many nation states that are trying to take advantage of the new reality post-World War II. That is, old empires completely devastated by the effects of World War II, like Great Britain. Iran was a colony of Great Britain, but because World War II was so devastating to Great Britain, as it was devastating to almost all European countries, Great Britain just can't hold on to its colonies anymore. And so Iran, along with all sorts of other former colonies of these empires, is vying for its independence. So political independence, claiming political independence is one thing, but being able to practice economic independence is another. And so the problem for a lot of these countries like Iran is that they are able to claim their political independence because Great Britain just can't control them anymore. Due to the mal-effects of World War II, they're just broke and they just don't have the manpower to control their colonies. But their resources are still controlled by private industry from the respective former colonial overlords, right? Great Britain, right? So British Petroleum still owns Iran's major resource, which is petroleum. And so they are not economically independent, which is a major problem. You can't really be politically independent unless you're economically independent. And so Mossadegh is in negotiations with BP of how to transfer control and ownership of those resources to Iran, so Iranians can benefit from the wealth that's being extracted from underneath their soil. BP's not going to go for it whatsoever, and so Iran makes an attempt to nationalize the pipelines and all factors associated with the petroleum industry once controlled by BP. Basically kicks BP out, and the government of Iran takes it over. They also take out loans from the Soviet Union. So that, and coupled with its loans from the Soviet Union, looks very much to the Eisenhower administration that Iran is drifting towards communist rule, right? In reality, it wasn't. It was a nationalist movement trying to gain control of its natural resources and using the Soviet Union as a way of procuring finances. But from the context of American foreign policymakers, this very much looked like the Soviet Union was going to make inroads into the Middle East, and that could not have happened. So what happens is the CIA orchestrates a coup led by Kermit Roosevelt, who was Teddy Roosevelt's grandson, destabilizes the country, overthrows the very popular democratically elected Mohammad Mossadegh. He's overthrown and taken out of office. And what happens is the CIA installs the Shah. The Shah means basically king in Persian. And the Shah basically enacts a very despotic police state in Iran for the next 20-odd years, until about 1979, when a group of students lead a revolutionary movement to overthrow the Shah. The end result, to make a long story short, is that the Iran is taken over by a theocratic government of Islamic clerics, with the pretense of democratic control, but the Islamic clerics have absolute veto power over any kind of government decision within the country. This is the blowback. 1979 happens, and the blowback continues throughout the 80s and through the 90s, and we're still dealing with a hostile relationship between the United States and Iran, and hopefully cooler heads prevail, because this is not a conflict that neither side would like to engage in. It would be a pretty bloody affair for both sides, and a very tragic one at that, too. So check out the link that's available on Iran and Guatemala as well. The same kind of thing is happening in Guatemala. There's a fiasco that's initiated by Eisenhower as well in Cuba that blows up in Kennedy's face, called the Bay of Pigs. But this is all part of a new way of trying to make foreign policy using the military a lot more efficient, right? Just use CIA operatives to empower those within in the nation state where we see problems, and so we don't have to be so involved in it, right? We can just use a few CIA operatives and use the actual people that live there to exercise our objectives within that national security. This the big legacy of Eisenhower under the second phase, though, of his attempt at trying to make it more efficient, really blows up in his face, though. So take a look at the speech that I have linked called The Military-Industrial Complex. It was his farewell address in 1961, where he lays out a metaphor of a building, basically saying that you have the government, you have private industry like Lockheed Martin, and you have the military, right? And they're all feeding on each other's own self-interest, right? And it's creating an incentive to spend lots of money on munitions, right? Eisenhower can't even control this. He wants to rein this in, but he's not able to control it. And he's very concerned about this because the incentive to develop weapons is not necessarily, and to maintain those weapons and munitions, is not necessarily for national security, but for the almighty dollar, right? For profit motives, and for political gain, right? So the maintenance of a large military means jobs, and jobs, if you maintain jobs as far as a congressional representative is concerned, whether you're a congressperson or a senator, it means votes, right? If you can maintain those jobs within your district or within your state. If you actively go against them because you see that maintaining some sort of helicopter that was first developed 20, 30 years ago is becoming obsolete, and you try to phase that out, which means closing maybe a factory within your representative district, well, you're going to be voted out of office, right? And this is happening all over the country in mass, and Eisenhower is very concerned about this, that the influences of the political influence and the economic influence behind this are beyond the control of the executive, of the executive branch. There's nothing he can do about it, right? He knew exactly how this operated, and there was really not much he can do about it. And so he makes this very strange speech indeed. He says, God bless you, God bless me, God bless America, and by the way, watch out for the military-industrial complex. The only way we can fight it is if you, the American people, stay informed. Please do. That's Eisenhower's message from 1961. His message is definitely still relevant. So check out his speech as preparation for this lecture. Anyway, we'll talk about Phase 3 in the next link. Talk to you later. Bye.